Hello everyone, and a warm welcome to week 9 of the SOA at Home Festival and to this session, Queen's Knickers Award, Children's Illustrators in Lockdown. Just a few points on the technical front, if you don't mind. In this session, please keep to listen-only mode, if you will. Your video and audio will be turned off. And if you want only to see the speakers, you can click on the icon in the top right of your screen, which will say gallery view or speaker view. And it's the speaker view that you want. Do please type your questions, comments and queries into the chat box, and we'll answer them towards the end of this 45-minute session. And of course, if there are any issues arising during the session, please type a private message to us and we'll get back to you immediately and individually. Just to say again, these sessions are free, but if you do wish to make a donation to the Authors Emergency Fund and support authors in financial difficulty owing to the health crisis, there is a link into the chat box that will take you straight to our GoFundMe page. I'm Paula Johnson and head of prizes and the prizes and awards team at the Society of Authors. The 22 prizes that we look after range from annual prizes for translated literature, prizes like the Sunday Times University of Warwick Young Writer of the Year Award and the ALCS Educational Writers Award, and our very own Society of Authors Awards. And one of these is the Queen's Knickers Award, which is a very special subject of today's talk. We're delighted to have 3 children's writers as guests with us this afternoon to take us into the world of prizes and picture book illustrations. So let's meet them. The children's writer and illustrator Nicholas Allan. He studied life painting at the Slade School of Art and an MA in creative writing at UEA, where he worked as a waiter while publishing short stories and exhibiting paintings. He created his first book in 1989 and became a full-time author-illustrator from then on. Many of his books are international and national bestsellers, including Jesus' Christmas Party, Picasso's Trousers, Where Willie Went, The Queen's Knickers, and Father Christmas Needs a Wee. His book Hilltop Hospital was adapted for television and won a BAFTA award and has sold over 40, in over 40 countries. He's also, of course, the founder of the Queen's Knickers Award. Alexis Deakin is a writer and illustrator of children's books. His first book, Slow Loris, was published in 2002 and was shortlisted for the Blue Peter Award. In 2015, it was named one of the 100 best children's books of all time by Time magazine. He's twice been shortlisted for the Kate Greenaway Medal and is a 2-time recipient of the New York Times Best Illustrated Children's Book Award. In 2014, The River, described as a luscious, tangled, whispering sort of story, won the Observer Jonathan Cape Comica Graphic Short Story Prize. In 2008, he was chosen by Book Trust as one of the 10 best new illustrators of the preceding decade. Children's writer and most recently of popular non-fiction for young children, Dawn Finch has worked with children's books and reading for over 30 years. She began her career in public libraries before moving on to children's and school libraries, where she specialised in the development and support of young readers. She is a CILIP trustee, and she is also, very importantly, chair of the Society of Authors Children's Writers and Illustrators Group. Thank you so much, all of you, for being here. Now, as today is the day before we celebrate the announcement of the winners of all the Society of Authors Awards, let's find out from Nicholas how the Queen's Knickers Prize all began. Nicholas. Nicholas, we can't hear you.
Hello, hello.
Ah, that's better. Nicholas, I wondered if you could let us into the mystery of how the Queen's Knickers Prize all began.
It began by looking at other prizes, book prizes, and I noticed that There's a kind of softness going into books these days. So it's kind of, I don't know if it's non-risk or not being quirky. No, they're just straightforward, very good, some of them very good narratives, but they lack that sort of oddness which children love. That's right, and what children go for often. And so I thought some of my books now wouldn't probably be taken. The Queen's Knickers was banned even of its time when I was published.
Really?
30 years ago, it was banned in bookshops, many bookshops, with Jesus Christmas parties being blasphemous. So now you go into a bookshop, a children's bookshop, and it's full of pant books, it's full of Queen books, and they don't think twice of it. So I thought I'd try to do a prize which was about a quirky book, for a quirky book, which has instant children's appeal, child appeal, but remains mainstream enough to be financially successful and continue. So there is that aspect, you've got to balance it. And many of my books are sold to adults rather than children. So they aim at that kind of market. It can go both ways. And you may risk not getting your foreign sales, which is so integral. But if the book's big enough, good enough, you can sell it just in one country or a couple of countries. So the Queen's Knickers sold so well in this country, it didn't matter. Other countries took it, but it didn't matter because there were such huge quantities that went out. And even if Jesus Christmas Party, which was thought of blasphemous, was very successful anyway, and it didn't matter if the church didn't like it much at first. And now they all buy it. So there we go. And that's why I did it. That's why, and I think young writers are more likely to win it because they've got nothing to lose, and they take the big risks. So it'd be nice if younger authors and illustrators who are just as important could win this prize.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, we've got a very exciting shortlist, the results of which will be announced tomorrow when the Society of Authors Awards are announced. Alexis, you're a judge of the award, and this is the very first award of this prize, so it is a very exciting thing for us to be celebrating it. Can you give us a little bit of a take through the shortlist and the joys of judging, or not?
Yeah, certainly. It was lovely to be asked to judge an award called the Queen's Knickers Award. It being the first time that it's ever run, you do question whether it might be some sort of elaborate hoax or spam when you see it in your email. But no, sure enough, it's a real thing. It was a fantastic prize to judge. I think it's such a good idea to use an award to try and incentivize risk-taking. I think Nicholas is spot on when he says that because of the commercial imperatives of publishing, they've become very risk-averse in this country. It's almost like children's books and what you are allowed to put inside a children's book has almost become a genre in itself, with very few people willing to put a toe outside that boundary. When Nicholas wrote The Queen's Knickers, that was an outrageous and daring thing to do. But as he rightly says, as books like that have been financially successful, gradually the sort of the pants book, or as he says, the Queen book, has become almost a genre in itself. So that's no longer a risk because people can see that there's profit in it and it's something that children are very excited to read. Of course, ironically, the things that children most want to read often are transgressive and risk-taking and rule-breaking. And in a market where everything tends to look and sound somewhat the same, if you do have the courage to take a risk, of course you can completely fall flat on your face and no one will hear of it again, but you stand the chance of being noticed and your book doing really well. And one thing that I loved about this prize is it just gives those books another chance to be seen and heard. So we had a fantastic time judging. It was myself Emily Gravett and Corky Paul. And I had a mountain of books to read over Christmas, I think it was.
Yes.
It's all become a fog.
Yes, well, quite. Yeah, just before, I mean, this actually was what's become a complete rarity now. It was the last and only one of this year's awards that was held face to face, even though there was a little bit of elbow bumping, but that was as much as we did. But we managed to sit in the same room and discuss the books. But all the other judging meetings have happened online, so it's inaugural in all sorts of ways.
Yeah, I remember the freestyle of going into the office and us all being unsure whether we should, wash our hands 20 times or drink from the same jug of water. Emily Gravett was much more on it than the rest of us. She wouldn't shake hands.
That's right.
Anyway,
yes,
shall I talk through the title?
Yes, would you?
Sure. So we've selected 5 for the Queen's Knickers Award, and each one very much merits its place, and each, I feel, is a very distinct and different thing unto itself. One of the things that we were asked to look for, in addition to risk-taking, was to see if we could reward people who were making their first steps into the industry. So we tried to give a slight advantage to people who are just writing their first or second book or just getting started out. Anyway, let me talk you through the titles. As you can see, they're behind me, so I'm going to point a little bit like a weatherman. Apologies to Child of St Kilda by Beth Waters here, as that's had to go behind some of the others. I think Child of St Kilda is also on the shortlist for the Greenaway. I might reach these things down. I'm going to be ruining my display, but try not to cause a landslide. I think when Dawn was talking about this book with us earlier, she was saying it seemed like something out of another era. It's just beautifully made, put together. The printmaking technique, I think it's monoprint. I'd have to look it up to be sure. It's really lush. You've got these beautiful soft edges and colours. And the story itself, if you're not aware of the island of St Kilda, it takes you through the story of one of the last children to ever be born on that island, an isolated community off the Scottish coast. And it's really grippingly told. I, as an adult, couldn't put it down when reading it. It's so densely packed with information, and you really felt the love that had gone into making the story. Let's reach the next one down. I'm trying not to kill myself once more. So this was How to Light Your Dragon, originally published in French, I believe. And the title sort of says it all with this one. Open flames, as I know from my own experience in trying to author children's books and get risky ideas through, are not best beloved by publishers, especially in the hands of children. But this book doesn't really care. Its whole mission is to get that dragon alight, and it's full with the most, I know that I can just open a page at random and it's going to be gloriously all over the place. There's so much energy in the pictures, in the words. It just bursts off the page. And I love it when a book doesn't seem to be afraid. It goes for it with both hands, and that book most certainly does that. This was our only longer title, Mr. Tiger, Betsy and the Sea Dragon. But again, in a similar way to How to Light Your Dragon, it's a really, really dense tale. It's absolutely packed to the brim with ideas and good content. It's a series, so there are some characters that have been built up over time, such as Mr. Tiger and Betsy. They appear in multiple adventures. But this one caught the eye of Corky Paul especially. Every chapter brings in a new adventure. There's pirates, there's sea dragons, as the title might suggest, golden apples. And it's all made so beautifully. Nick Malin's done a fantastic job with illustration. I really liked, as someone who is not the world's best designer, I really loved seeing how beautifully integrated the text and illustrations were together. They work wonderfully to tell the story in combination. I think that's fantastic to see, especially
lovely end papers too.
Readers.
Sorry, lovely end papers too.
Beautiful end papers, yeah. And it's one of those books that feels nice in hand. I know that shouldn't really be a criteria, should it? But it appeals to me. So yeah, a fantastic story. And again, it's a breakneck pace as well. So our last two, Umbrella. This was this is a first-time author. I know that actually a couple of the people on the shortlist were former students at Anglia Ruskin University, so I was lucky enough to teach Elena. And I hadn't seen this book before judging, but it's an absolute joy from start to finish. The illustrations are unlike anything else. You know, as an illustrator, you get used to seeing the same conventions repeated over and over. And somehow this feels like its own distinct work. And it's just something that I often look for in a book is a kind heart. Like you feel that there's a golden spirit behind this work. Every page just feels full of love. Like I think one of the criteria that Nicholas mentioned was that he wanted books that were made because, you know, for the joy of making a book. And this book absolutely falls into that category. I think this also might be the kind of book that would otherwise perhaps get overlooked with its soft colours and, you know, there's something gentle about it. And I feel like it deserves being shouted about. So I'm really happy to have that one on the shortlist too. Finally, rounding out the list is One Fox. I'm not sure, I haven't dared to read this to my little 3-year-old niece yet. It actually is quite scary. It bills itself, I think, as a counting book thriller, and it really does pay off. I love books that feel well structured and well thought through, and this one is expertly told. So you start with one famished fox, and I think we can see where it's headed from then. As you count through the numbers 1 to 10, the peril, the risk and the danger gets gradually heightened. And this is a post I want my hat back culture, where you know that it is possible for protagonists to get bumped off in picture books. So there's a real sense of peril oozing through this one. And I hope that the children's book counting thriller becomes a genre after this.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So a joyful list, and it was a real pleasure judging them all.
And Dawn, I know that you're a collector of shortlists in a way to recommend to people.
I do. I mean, I have over the years. I've become a bit obsessed with shortlists, and I do collect. I don't only collect lists of shortlists. I actually collect the books on the shortlists, and in particular, I find it very hard to get rid of books because shortlists. I'm quite often. It's almost. I'm almost less interested in the winner because I love the thought that a whole group of people have sat and worked together and sort of condensed all their thoughts and opinions into this one list, this one shortlist. I love long lists and short lists, and it's interesting. We had a CWIG meeting the other day, and SF Said was saying the same thing. Loves long lists and short lists because they kind of, with so many books published every year, it's genuinely hard to find ones and that you think are particularly special. And I think with this award in particular, I really like the quieter nature of them. As Alexis was saying, that there are quite a lot of books out there that are noisy, that are very loud and splashy, and lots of glitter and lots of flaps and lots of things going on. And I really like the fact that this is a little pile of books that might otherwise not have been noticed. I mean, like Alexis was saying about The Child of St Kilda, and it felt very like those, Margaret Bloy Graham, who illustrated for Jean Zion, the Harry the Dirty Dog, and the books that I grew up with in the 70s, and yet this is a first book, and yet these very traditional illustrations. And books like Umbrella, that, as Alexis said, that wouldn't necessarily get noticed. And Mr. Tiger, Betsy and the Sea Dragon, which is just a joy all the way through, every page, with this wonderful dyslexia-friendly typeface, and the illustrations that are carefully linked to what's going on the page. And yeah, I think this is definitely one of those little shortlist piles that I might be hanging on to for quite some time. I think there's lots of times where I'll be saying, oh, I know just the thing, I've got just the book for you. And as a non-fiction writer, the inclusion of stuff that, like Child of St Kilda, which has a lot of non-fiction.
Yes, it is a very non-fiction. You learn a lot about history in that book.
You do, and I really like also little things like these books just have they don't. This is going to sound terrible. They don't all feel classically English. There's a very sort of Americanized English style at the moment of very splashy colours, certain number of pages, certain type of illustration on each page. And it's kind of, whilst that's great and lots of kids love them, it's very nice to see something that's just a little bit different as well.
Well, I'm glad to say that not just this lovely shortlist, and it is, but all the shortlisted books for all the prizes that will be announced tomorrow are also available to buy from Blackwell's. And by buying via the link that you'll find on the chat line, you will be donating to the author's emergency fund. So a win all round, I think. Anyway, I wanted to ask you, I mean, just to say, what do you really think, Alexis, I suppose I should fire this at you, what do you think is the most important thing this prize is going to bring to the canon of, because there are a lot of children's prizes.
I don't think quantity of prizes is necessarily a problem, especially these days. It's almost like we have to circle the wagons a little bit in publishing to make sure that good quality books continue to get made and get seen. It's a world where you have to shout loud and things are very disposable and very immediate. And things like prizes just help. We can take the time. I read hundreds of titles for this award, and we can help things not to slip through the net. In terms of what the Queen's Knickers Awards will be going forward, that's partially, of course, for Nicholas to shape. But what I'd hope is that it continues to reward books that exist on the margins and continue to expand our idea of what a children's book is and can be. And particularly books that I suppose are made for their own sake. I'm always a bit suspicious when you're making a book with a sort of ulterior motive in mind to try and appeal to a particular niche in a market, or maybe blue covers were popular last year and you want to do your blue cover book. That's okay, but this award isn't for those sorts of books. This award, I feel, should be for books that were made because the author felt they had to be made. This was a story they really wanted to tell, and that they got it out there by hook or by crook. And hopefully this award can help those sorts of books find their audience. Of course, if they can be outrageous and daring and rule-breaking and transgressive at the same time, that's fantastic too.
All for the good. Now, I want to just hold up, if I may. Nicholas, you're wearing a rather nice little badge, I think.
Oh, yes. There's one that you can win. Actually, you can't win this one.
No, you can't win that. But
this one is a white one, which has got the Queen on it. I don't know if you can see it.
Well, I'm going to try. I'm going to show you the ones that you can win. The first prize winner will win, in addition to £5,000, the gold badge with the Queen's head. I don't know if everybody can see it. It's rather lovely. And the runner-up will win not only the money but the silver badge. So rather.
But I could never win those.
No, I'm afraid not. You're debarred from that particular. So, do you feel writing during this pandemic time has made you create new kind of, or think of creating new settings or new scenarios?
I suppose so, but it's business as usual, really, because I'm trapped in this room anyway. Whether there's whatever the disease is going around at that time, but also I do my own illustration, So there's no sort of conferring with people. So you leave you pretty much isolated. But on the other hand, you do think more about your condition and the human condition generally. And it does, I think it has provoked new ways of seeing, because you're stuck here and you suddenly see other ways of looking, which is nice, I suppose. And I'm ideally situated right in the centre of the city, where everything's not going on.
Quieter, yes.
Yeah, and it's nice not having jets over you and just walk around the streets like 28 days after, and nothing's happening. It's really quite funny. But I mean, I'll be glad when it's over, and it'd be nice, you know, that when things are back to normal in some ways.
Yes. But what about has life in Scotland? That's where you are, Dawn, isn't it?
Yeah, I'm halfway between Aberdeen and Inverness, so I'm quite a long way up. And as a non-fiction writer, I hate to bring doom and gloom to this proceedings, but I've had no work at all. Most of the books most non-fiction books, obviously the things that I write, I'd have to go out and visit sites. I take the photographs for the books as well, so I can't get out to any sites. All of the books that were in the planning stage have been stopped, and no, there is no work at all. So no, I'm effectively, well, right now unemployed seems to be the way. So until, and even then, I think even after things open up again, lots of the educational publishers are planning to have books written in-house, and so for a lot of us who were sort of jobbing people, we now don't have that at all. So I think we're going to have to learn how to navigate a very different environment, or maybe write something else.
Yes, well, it's going to be a very busy 2021, that's for sure.
Very much so, yeah. And I think, and I know I'm not alone, and I know that there are people who are a lot worse off. I'm lucky that I'm in a situation that I'm not the main breadwinner. But yeah, in libraries and in the kind of work that we do, it's been the worst year.
Yes, absolutely. Just inward. And what about in Hastings, Alexis?
Yeah, well, as Nicholas said, there's something about the life of the author illustrator which has been somewhat socially distanced since forever. So in that sense, not much changes. In terms of what the experience is like on the streets, you can tell that something very different and monumental is taking place. And I think, as we're all starting to realise, the effects are going to ripple through for a long time to come. I've actually been furloughed from a book that I was working on. I was lucky enough to get another job working for an animation company. I am supporting my household, so it's been a little bit of a scary time. I'm very glad that I've been able to find different work. In terms of it filtering through to the stories that I'm writing, I actually have a book coming out next year about a little baby bird who's stuck in her egg. And it was not intended in any way to be about this, because it's going to be happily on message when it comes out, which I'm quite glad about. But yeah, in terms of future work, it's not often that you get to live through such historically pivotal times and see them firsthand. So I'm sure that that's going to come out in a lot of our work.
Yes, it won't be immediate. I mean, I think the effects of this will come out in literature over the next few years, for sure. But are you sitting in the rooms where you work at the moment? Nods from Nicholas and Alexis.
I am. It depends on the work that I'm doing. If I'm laying things out and I really need to be concentrated, then I'll work upstairs in a room with far fewer distractions. But if I need to do anything online, then I have to be in this room. This is my front room, so yeah, I have to be in this one. It's also good because you can't see any piles of washing or It's a good room for Zoom meetings, because that's the other thing. We've had to dive into this digital world and think about how everything looks behind us. This room's always pretty tidy, so I'm okay on this room. And you can't see at this blur, you also can't see the excessive snowdrifts of cat hair, which are on the other sofa. So yeah, I do work in this room.
And I mean, do you feel that in any sense your imaginative flow has been interrupted by Zoom meetings? Because they are pretty constant. Look at us now.
It's funny, isn't it? I mean, right at the beginning of all this, if somebody, I mean, I didn't even do Skype. And if somebody had said to me, oh, we're going to do, a video call. No, absolutely no. I've kind of got used to seeing my face now. I think I don't, given for me, obviously, because if I have a travel down for a meeting, that's 3 days, because I have to fly down one day, do the meeting, fly up the next. So it's a long process. Whereas I'm sitting here in my allotment jeans. I was at my allotment this morning. I will be on my allotment after this. So it's given some, strangely, all these video meetings have now given me back my life. It's really weird. I don't have to do all the traveling anymore. So I prefer it. I don't want to go back to it. I like the Zoom meetings. I'm hooked now.
Well, I think it's possible and probable, I think, that they will become a part of our future lives, having occupied taken such a role. Alexis, are you similarly beset, or?
How do you mean by
just by interruptions to the imaginative flow?
No, I've been spared the worst of them, I feel like. I think that's partly because the project that I was working on, as I said, isn't going on for a bit. So there's no professional meetings. I think when term starts again in the autumn, and hopefully I go back to my teaching job at Anglia, that's going to be a trial for sure. A day of constant 15-minute tutorials back to back can get pretty exhausting at the best of times. But when you're doing it on a screen as well, I think that will break me. But we'll see. I did one day of marking on Zoom, and that was enough to make your brain leak out of your ears. But, mostly my interaction is dance classes on Zoom, so I have positive associations with Zoom.
Very good, very good. When you write, and I suppose I could ask all three of you this question, do you ever write with a real child in mind? I mean, who is in your mind when you settle down to?
I do very much. My books are prepared for the curriculum, so I'm very much thinking of the primary school children that I worked with and thinking how they would like to see a book laid out, of the kind of information that will both fuel their knowledge and keep their interest. So there's lots of times when, and I've had very good editors who will say, no, we're not doing that, no, we're not doing that, and have you tried this? And I want to put everything that I think is going to be interesting. So I think I need to be reined back by excellent editors who say, no, absolutely not. But yeah, I one thing I had in mind was trying to, when I was doing a one on hill forts, trying to use units of measurement for how deep the barricades were for a hill fort, and thinking, is that a giraffe or an elephant? Do we use thinking we couldn't use I didn't want to use a bus because everybody uses a bus and not all children are thinking of buses. I'm thinking, right, that's as tall as a giraffe. Is it as tall as a giraffe in a hat? Thinking how much I can get away with. So yeah, very much thinking about primary school children.
What about you, Nicholas? Do you have a child in mind, or is it yourself, or?
Child is me, and I just write them for my own amusement, and that's what I do, and then hope that someone else likes it. I think if you like it, if you're ready.
Nicholas, can I ask you to sit back a tiny bit, because we're missing your expressions, which is a shame.
Well, I don't think so. But if I write for myself, it's purely for amusement. That's what it is. So I may write an adult novel for my amusement, and I feel that's a guarantee that someone will like it if it amuses me. So that's why I mean, the Queen's Knickers, for as example, is I just thought it'd be very funny just to have that title on a manuscript, and I didn't really think about what was inside it. I just wrote that.
Started going.
Yeah. So I think that's a good way of doing it. But of course, there's a lot of things I like which no one likes, but I won't go into that. But so it's probably not reliable. But you're probably thinking of your editor, if you want.
But you're obedient to their requests, are you?
Oh yes, I absolutely appreciate their input. I think, particularly my first editor, who's now looking at my work again, my old editor, the original editor, and it's great. She bins every day. At last, someone who bins everything and says, "No, you can do better. You can start again. Start again." But just says the right thing to get me going on something else, and then that's what you're looking for, the ideal editor.
Would either of you, Alexis and Nicholas, ever consider illustrating a book for another author if you were asked to do so?
Well, I was, and I thought for once I'll try it out, and it was offered by a good company. They paid a lot, and I tried it out. I've never. I'm afraid it was a very unrewarding experience. And I know it's not for everyone, but I didn't feel it was my book, and I didn't feel. I feel it's an organic thing for me, just for me, that you have to do the whole lot. It's all part of one thing. It's not. It's one thing. It's not. It's just a different genre from a painting or from something else, and that's it. It is a picture book which you write or illustrate depending on how you feel about things.
Do you consider yourself a writer first, don't you, I think?
No, it can come from just a drawing, I see. But I do think the story is very important because, the illustrator can just use the story to bounce the ideas off. But, when you're sitting at a desk with a sheet of white paper and a pen, there's nothing. That's it. And it doesn't get any better, and it stays blank for a very long time. And that's why I find I find that very difficult. But the illustrating the book, I just didn't work for me. But I know, obviously, it works for a lot of people. And the most brilliant books have been achieved through different writers and illustrators working together. I mean, fantastic books. So there you go.
And Alexis, would you be willing to?
Yes, I've done it. I've done it many times. I have my bookshelf behind me because of this is my strategic Zoom corner, so I was just able to reach back. I collaborated with Russell Hoban on a couple. I've got Jim's Lion here and Soonchild here. These were fantastic to do. Soonchild was Russell Hoban's last book, so I got to meet him on a few occasions.
He's a wonderful writer.
I loved working with Russell Hoban. It was fantastic.
Yeah.
And I've written for other people to illustrate as well. I think each has their advantages and their disadvantages. You do kind of get stuck in the same little loops, I find, in my case, if you're not sort of tested from outside. That's kind of why it's essential to have an editor. In answer to the earlier question about how and why we write or who we write for, I think I'm very much of the same camp as Nicholas, where I write as a compulsion. It's not it's not a particularly sensible thing to do. I just can't stop myself. And then as soon as it exists, you think, well, we should try and get somebody to do something with this. I'd love other people to see it. So I rely on my friends and peers and editors to tell me what makes any sense and what they enjoy and what they don't.
Good. I'm tested on that one. So, I mean, do you have a favourite book amongst those that you've written yourself?
Shall I just carry on?
You carry on.
It kind of it changes all the time, and they're all quite different. I have a soft spot for one called Crock and Bird that I wrote 2012, I think. It felt like its heart was in the right place, and there's something about it that felt like it chimed well with what I try and do with stories. Especially I always like it when I can end on a strong image word combination. I felt like Crock and Bird had a really nice ending that I'm still very proud of. So that's probably my favourite of my own, but it does change all the time.
What about you, Dawn?
This is a bit more of a difficult question, because I think probably there are a couple of books that I've worked on that do spring to mind, but my name's not on them, so I'm not allowed to say which ones they are. But I don't know really. It's something that I really enjoy. So I'm really proud of some of the glossaries I've written, and I know that sounds really daft, but taking a complex term and turning it into one sentence that a 7 to 9 year old can understand is, I like puzzles. And yeah, so I'm afraid I haven't written anything very beautiful like Alexis and Nicholas, or anything that is going to be one of those wonderful children's classics that people look back on years and years. But I've probably taught a few children a few new things. I'm proud of that. Maybe my Scara Bray book, I'm really proud of that one.
And Nicholas? I mean, I think probably Picasso's. I think Picasso's trousers ought to be.
Yeah, I think it. Yeah, I think it said everything I want to say.
Yeah.
This is I don't know, Chinese, and it just encapsulated what I want to say, that you should resist everything, and this is a story about his trousers, which is true, and he wanted trousers that. Actually, I won't tell you the ending. But it sums up everything about Picasso and everything about doing things which people say you don't do it, and you immediately go and do it. And that's something I wanted to get across. But I like the Queen's Knickers because it's just completely stupid. I mean, I always like Pooh Bear because it has no moral value to it. It's just complete off the wall. And I wanted something like that, and I hope it has no moral value at all. Which is.
And was that one of the first books that you read?
No, I read it when I was an adult. My father used to like it. Oh, he was called Pooh, that's why. My mother called him Pooh because he was quite short and he wore a brown coat. So when she's on a tube or something shouting out Pooh, it's embarrassing as children. She was called Jez after the biblical character, so I don't want to go into. Anyway, that's probably the best, I think, so far.
I'm very happy to take any questions that any of the audience, and big welcome to the audience. If there are any questions that anyone feels they'd like to ask, please do go ahead. But we'll carry on. How real do you think stories actually need to be?
In what sense?
How much of a sense of reality does there need to be when you're doing the Queen's Knickers? There's a bit of reality there, but it's fancy also. I mean,
yeah,
do you try and keep reality? Is it always present, or?
I suppose, yes, there has to be some sort of line. I mean, teachers use it as a case of, is this documentary or is it fiction? Which is quite interesting because she switches voices. I didn't realise it until I read this chapter in the teaching book. And it said how the voice changes from a little girl to official English, Queen's English, because it transitions between something which is apparently real fact. The Queen wears these and these, and then it goes into this little girl's thoughts about wonder what she wears when she comes to schools and things. So I think there's got to be some balance, and if you go too far one way, it can sort of disillusion you. I remember that about Lord of the Flies. Piggy's glasses are convex when they should be concave or something. So all the incidents that happened, like the fire and stuff, couldn't be lit by his glasses. And this ruined the book for me. Well, there's a slight mistake, which, but I think, oh, it doesn't fit. It's wrong. And it broke down the whole novel for me.
Yeah.
It was stupid, isn't it? It's just a very slight thing like that.
So just tell me very quickly what you're going to be doing tomorrow morning. Dawn.
The routine.
Yes.
Who's starting?
Sorry? Dawn, I think.
Oh, me, tomorrow morning. Well, this is Scotland, so a lot will depend on what the weather is. The one thing I've learned about Aberdeenshire is that you never go to bed with the weather you woke up with. So if it's sunny, I will be out and down the allotment, and then I will work at the overcast later. If it's overcast, I'll work first, and then I'll go down the allotment when it's good. So it tends to be, I think I'm wearing a groove in the pavement between here and the allotment, because that's the only place I've been since about the beginning of March. I obviously preempted the lockdown by being voluntarily locked down before then. So yeah, that tends to be about it. And I will do I do some work online, and it's Thursday, so there'll probably be a meeting, and so I'll just squidge bits in. The nice thing about Scotland is that this far north, we're running on sort of 18-hour days at the moment, so it doesn't really get dark. So if you wanted to be down the allotment particularly late, or you want to carry on particularly late, you can, because we only get about 5 hours of sort of blue darkness at the moment. So that's quite nice. So.
And I must interrupt, because there's a lovely comment that has just come in, and we're running near to our end. So I will just say this. This isn't a question, but he's an ex-KS1 early years teacher. He wanted to say that children's illustrators are the unsung heroes of children's imaginative lives, and they create real, beautiful, hilarious and moving works of art which are rarely seen by adult readers other than the parents of young children. You enriched so many lives. Well, I can't really say more than that. Thank you all very, very much. A huge thanks. It's been a complete treat and fascinating to be taken into your writing worlds. Tomorrow, we all celebrate the 2020 Authors Awards, including the inaugural Queen's Knickers Award. They'll be announced this year with a series of online videos and beginning at 10 a.m. Don't miss the fun. We're also going to be joined by author and Waterston's Children's Laureate Cressida Cowell tomorrow for afternoon tea, which will be a day of excitement. You can sign up for our festival events on our website and watch them later on our Vimeo channel. So many thanks again to Nicholas, Alexis and Dawn. If you want to continue the conversation on Twitter, our festival hashtag is #SOA@home. Thank you all so much.